Hello and welcome ProITians. So I hope you guys are enjoying and loving these sessions, right? If you're doing so, let me ask you to subscribe the channel by clicking on the subscribe icon and then hit on the bell icon to get notified as soon as the new videos are uploaded. And if you're liking these videos, please do click on the like icon. Yeah, great. So let's start. So in the last session we saw about functions, right? And we saw how we can use the functions, isn't it? So we saw that we can define a function and use it whenever we want in our codes, right? And we also saw that there are some inbuilt functions in Python like int or input and print. Those are the inbuilt functions of Python, right? And then we saw how we are going to, define our own functions, and then we can call those functions and get the output of it, right? Now let's take the functions to the next level, right? So what we are going to learn in this session is we are going to learn some use cases with functions. Yeah? So we are going to start with our required and positional parameters. Then we are going to talk about a default parameters. Then we are going to move to the next one, that is keyword arguments or keyword parameters. And then we are going to talk about the variable parameters. So these are the things that we are going to cover in this session, and we are going to have a lot of fun in this session, right? Remember guys, these are all the building blocks to learn the programming that we are going to talk about, or that we are actually gradually building up our skills on, right? So all these are building blocks, right? So I would actually ask you to go through the videos which I have already done in the last sessions. Be familiar to all those things before we move on to the next one. It's all sequential, and we need to pass on all this through a sequence, right? We can't, in case if you are aware of Python and you're just doing a refresher sort of for knowledge with these sessions, then it's fine. But if you're new to programming, I would actually want you to go through the sessions start to end with whatever we are teaching. And in case if you are not clear, you can always go back to the sessions, post on your queries on the comment sections. I'll come back to you with my with the answers to that questions, right? All right, guys. Enough talk. Let's go to the session and see some live examples and see some use cases with the definitions, right? With the defining functions. All right. Great. Thank you. Welcome back, ProITians. Now you know what a function is and how to write a function in Python language, isn't it? You also know that you can write functions dynamic by passing arguments into the function, isn't it? These functions can be used in 4 ways in Python, that is, with required or positional arguments, with default arguments, with keyword arguments, and with variable length arguments, right? Let's take each of this and see how we can use those in Python. Okay, so let's start with required or positional argument, right? So in required or positional argument, whatever number of arguments or parameters that you specify, the definition of function, that corresponding value must be passed by calling the function, right? Let's take an example. Okay, so let me define a function to add two numbers. So I'll say def x comma y space y and then enter, and then I put sum is equals to x plus y. return sum. Alright, now as you can see, we have written a program to add two numbers x and y, and it is going to accept the values for x parameter and y parameter, and then later on it is going to add those numbers. So sum is equals to x plus y, and then it is going to return that sum. Right, let's take an example. Right, so for that what we'll have to do is we have already defined the function, and the function name is add. Right, so we are now going to call the function. So for that, add, right, then I'll give two numbers. Let's give 7 and 9. Right, what happens? Yeah, so 7 plus 9 is 16. So we got the value of 16 for those two numbers. Right, now since these two arguments are there, right, I need to provide two values, isn't it? The first value will be assigned to x, and the second value will be assigned to y. Right? So required function means both values are required. Right? Both values will be required. Right? And the positional means that both values will be in a particular position. So for example, when I'm actually passing on this function, defining the function, then I'm actually x and y are the parameters that I'm defining in the add function, and I'm going to pass on the values 7 and 9. So that means positional value of 7 is corresponding to the positional parameter of this function. So 7 will be assigned to x and 9 will be assigned to y. Right? Great. So now, is it possible that if I just pass only one argument, what happens in that case? Right? Now, as we can see, we have passed two arguments to this function. Right? Now, what happens if I pass only just one argument? Right? So let me pass on only just 7. Okay. What do you think, guys? What should I get? I mean, is it going to accept this one and give the value 7 out here because 7 plus 0, or is it going to give me an error? Food for a thought, isn't it? Right, let's try. Alright, so I got an error, right? It's a type error, missing one required positional argument. So it is one required and a positional argument for y parameter, isn't it? Okay, because the first value was taken for x and y there was no defined. We had not actually provided the value for y, so that's why we got this error. Right now, it could be a requirement wherein we might have to keep a default value to this argument. Is it possible that we have a default value? We can assign a default value, right? Is it possible that way? Because in the early example we saw that whatever number of parameters are defined, we had to provide the same number of corresponding number of arguments, right? So, and since we had not provided here, that's why it actually got failed. Now, is it possible that we assign a default value? Right? Let's have a look. Okay, let's take this example where we have to define add x comma y equals 0, and then colon enter sum is equals to x plus y, and then I hit enter, return sum. Alright, now let me call that function add bracket 7. I just pass on one value. So let's see what happens this time. Is it going to give the error again, or is it going to accept the value as 7 and give the output 7 plus 0 as 7? Right, let's see. Yeah, so we got the value as 7. right? Because in this case, what happened is 7 was accepted as x, and since we had not defined any value for y, it took the value of 0, right? So that's why 7 plus 0, it actually resulted in 7, right? So in case of default argument, it is possible to provide some default values to the parameters at the time of defining a function, right? So when calling a function, if there is no value provided to the function, then it will take a default value. So in this case, when we didn't define any function, it took the default value of 0, right? But if a different value is assigned, then it will take that value, right? For example, add 7 comma 9, and I hit enter. So in this case, it took 16 because since this time we defined value for y as 9, it actually considered 9 for y, and in the sum 7 plus 9, it gave the output as, it returned the value as 16, right? So what we have seen here is whenever we provide a value, it takes that precedence. If we don't provide the value, then default value will be considered. Right? Now let's take an example with simple program for calculating interest. Right? So for that, what we'll do is we'll consider that the default interest rate is 7%. Right? So for that, let's define a function. Define interest. For that, we need to define an amount, number of days, amount will be provided, and the interest. Okay, so here we will define the value as 7, and then right, then I'm going to define it as I for interest is equals to amount, that's this particular amount, into bracket days divided by 100 divided by 365, right, into interest divided by 100, right? I will put this also in parenthesis, right, and then I return I. Alright. Now in this example, what we are doing is we have defined the function with the name interest. It is going to accept the value of amount, the amount which is required as a loan, the number of days that is required for the amount, and the rate of interest. The default value of the interest is 7, but consider if it's like a high valued customer and you want to give more rebate to that user, then you can actually override this value of 7 with a different value. So let's have a look. Okay, so for this, what I'll do is interest, and for amount, it's going to be like, we'll give him 10,000 rupees, and 4 days for like 15 days, and interest, if I don't give if I keep that, let's try with the default interest, and I hit enter. So what happens here? So you got the value as 28.76 because it has taken the default value of 7%, right? So what it has done is amount 1000 rupees into 15 days, and 15 divided by 365, and then interest into 7 divided by 100, right? So then you get this value, right? But in case, as I said, if it's like your a valued customer, high profile customer, right, then how you're going to override this value? So you can give him rate of interest as 6.5, yeah, and see. So then in that case, you get the rate of interest as with the amount as 26, right? Because you have altered the value of the interest, right? Right. So now you saw that how we have overridden the default parameter um, by providing the desired rate of interest, right? One more thing I wanted to inform you out here is when we are using the default parameter is whatever values we have to assign for the default parameter should be at the rightmost. It should be at the rightmost. You can't say like define function a comma b is equals to 5 comma c is equals to c, and this way. You can't do it this way. That will throw up the syntax error, because syntax will only accept the values or the default values at the rightmost, right? But in case if you want to have some more default values, then you can have it as this one. This way it will accept, yeah, but not. I mean, all the default values should be at the rightmost of your syntax, right? Yeah. So we cannot have it vice versa. Like we keep a is equals to 3 and b comma c. No, that's not possible. Yeah, it has to be at the rightmost. That's the principle for the syntax. All right. Okay. Great. Now, why do we need to have a default parameter? Yeah. So, what's the use of having this default parameter? Simply put, default parameters in Python, like most of the any other programming language, is used to save some keystrokes, right? I mean, you don't want to add some keys to it unnecessarily. Like, for example, when you have a fixed rate of interest, you don't need to assign the values again and again, right? It's going to be there, and it's going to be your default value, right? In case if you don't want, you can always override with the value of default parameter with the value that you want to assign, right? Now let's move to the next one, wherein we'll discuss about keyword arguments, right? So consider that there's a need to alter the order of argument, then I need to explicitly provide the values for that, right? Let's take an example. Okay, so in this same example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put interest, T-E-R-E-S-T, yeah, and I'm going to put days equals 50, amount equals 10,000, right, and interest equals 6.5. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so you got the same value, right, which we saw a bit earlier, right? So with this, what you have seen is that the keywords are shuffled, right? These keywords are shuffled, right? But the name of the keyword matches to the name of the function. Okay, so even though we have shuffled it, it actually matches to the parameters that we have defined in the function, right? And then if we've shuffled it, we have actually provided the value for those three keywords, right? So we pass the values to the amount, and then days and amount, and then interest, and then it was able to calculate it in this way, right? So that was about keyword argument. Let's move to the next one, that is variable length argument, right? So before that, there's one query which I wanted to ask you. Can a function in Python have a known number of arguments, right? Till now we have seen that we are defining the arguments, and then accordingly we are assigning the values. In the earlier example, first example, we saw that we had to provide the values corresponding to the arguments. In the second value, a second example we saw that we are passing on the default value to the argument. And now third one, we saw about the keyword argument. Now the next one, is it possible that we can keep it as like sort of a wild character when we don't know what sort of how many number of arguments that will be required in the program? Is it possible in Python? Well, the answer is yes, right? And Python, as far as I know, is the only language which can accept the the wildcard sort of arguments, right? Let's have a look. Let's check out how it is possible. Okay, for that, let's take an example wherein we need to write a program to calculate the average number of marks for students in a class. Okay, so in this, the number of students in the class might vary actually from between from one class to another, right? In a particular class, you can have like 20 students. In another class, you can have 22 students, and in another class, you can have 25 students. So it's actually going to change from class to class, right? So it's not going to be constant, right? So how we are going to write a function, okay, where you don't know how many values a user is supposed to provide, right? So is there a way to that we can do it? Okay, let's look with an example, right? So let's start with def. Okay, def avg. That is, let's take an example for finding the marks. So, okay, there was a typo. Def average, and then marks, right? Now, by default, I would have put just marks, right? But in case if I don't know how many parameters or how many arguments or how many values it is going to accept, how are we going to do that? So it's like a function with a variable length actually, right? If we don't know the length of the arguments, right? It's an open-ended. So for that, we're going to pass on with star. So it's the wildcard entry, right? And then I'll continue with the same way. I'll continue with colon, right? And then I'll put as I equals to 0, n equals 0. I'll explain you in bit why I is equals to 0 and n is equals to 0. For m in marks, okay? Yeah. So what I'm doing out here, okay? So I'm actually put the wildcard for marks, that is the wildcard of variable length argument. I is equals to 0 because that is the counter which I'm going to use to increment for every number of students. N is equals to 0 because n I'm going to use for summing the marks, and with that I'm going to get the average by dividing the total number of marks with the total number of students. Yeah. So, and then now what I've done is I have introduced this for loop for m is equal in marks, right? So with this I've introduced the for loop, right? Okay. So what next? Then I'm going to pass on with n is equal to n plus m. Okay. One moment. Let me make it better. Okay, and then I need to increase the counter with every student, right? So I plus equals to 1. So with every student, what will happen is it will start with 0. So n is equals to 0 plus the marks. So it will take the marks of the first student. Then it is going to increment the value, and since I is equals to 0 in the first, so it is going to increment it to 1 after taking the value of n, right? And then I want to need the average, isn't it? So then I will actually avg is equals to n divided by I, right? So I'm actually coming out of the for loop. So this will keep on doing it for the marks that is going to be added. The for loop will continue, And then once that is done, once this calculation is done, we'll perform the average of it, and then what we'll do is we'll return the average. Okay, yeah, click. So I'll hit enter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the function average, and then I'm going to start with marks 92, comma 97, comma 98, or 98, comma 100 maybe, comma some students might have not got so good marks, right? So, and then I hit enter, right? So with this, what I've got is I could have made it more fancy by providing the statement print output and all those things, right? But just for the simplicity, I've made it very simple. So average is 93 for that class, right? And as you can see, it is all automatically converted to float value because we are using a division sign. Right? So the average marks for this particular class is 93. Right? Let's take another example. AVG, comma 92, comma 97, comma 100. Will this work? Because in the end, let's take the example for the another class, right? So we have 3 students in the another class, right? In this, the average of that class is 96%, right? Okay, so as we saw, it was able to accept the values five parameters of marks, and then in the second example, it was able to accept the value of 3 marks, right? And it was able to calculate the average quite nicely, right? So there's no limitation in that. We can provide any number of values and still get the result, right? Great. I hope you were able to understand functions and understand the use cases that was provided in the example. I'll actually stop here so that we don't confuse ourselves much. I think we've covered quite a bit out here, right? Please do subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notified. Please also click on the like icon if you're enjoying these videos, right, and these learnings which I'm providing and uploading on a timely way, right? Okay, until next time, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.